Welcome everyone, kia ora, malawalele, and welcome to our public forum for November. I'm really thrilled that today we get to relaunch ourselves. So many of you will know us as the TBI Network. We've been the TBI Network for about 6 or 7 years now, and we've been really thrilled that this year our efforts and our growth has been recognised by AUT, the university, and they have upgraded us to an institute. So we're now going to be known as the Brain Health Research Institute, or BHRI for short. So just to let you all know, that's the reason for the name change. It does mean that the university is investing in us. So this is really important recognition for us, and really does show the value of all of our hard work and achievements over the last few years. So the investment from the university will mean we can do even more going forward. So this is a really exciting time for us. And thank you to everyone who has really contributed to making this Institute a real success. So kia ora and thank you to all of you, all of your contributions, coming along to these forums, sharing your ideas, getting in contact with us, sharing your experiences, all forms part of who we are and what we aim to achieve. So my sincere thanks to all of you for your contributions. Now, I would like to add that whilst the name of a research institute sounds quite cold to some people, we acknowledge that, I can assure you that our ethos really to facilitate collaboration between the public, researchers, and all of our service providers out there, that's not changing. We're still really committed to breaking down the isolated competitive nature of academia, and we really want to do the research that's really meaningful to our communities and to keep working in this collaborative way. So that to us is really important, and that for us won't change, even though that our name has. So with a view to the future ahead, and hopefully it's an exciting future, this public forum, we wanted to do something a little bit different. And we wanted to have a focus on new things that are coming up, things that you can get involved with if you're interested, just to share with you some of the exciting new projects that are underway as part of our new Brain Health Research Institute. So we have 4 speakers today. The talks will be shorter than we normally have because this is presenting new ideas and new initiatives. So we'll just ask each of our speakers to talk briefly for about 10 minutes, and then we'll invite discussion and questions to help us to develop those ideas, or you can pop your name in the chat if you're interested in us getting in contact with you, or contact the person directly if you're interested in taking part in what they're up to. So I guess first up, can I pick on you, Stacey? Is that okay? I think you were first up on the agenda that's gone out online. So it's really great that Stacey's going to talk to us about a super exciting initiative that we would really love to have people's thoughts and ideas on. So I'll pass over to Stacey to tell us more about it. Thanks, Stacey.
Thanks, Alice. I didn't know I was up first, but this is exciting. Great. Kia ora, everyone, and thank you for having me, Alice. It is so exciting to be here. Just briefly, for those of you who don't know us, Headway is a community organisation really dedicated to changing the way Aotearoa responds to concussion and brain injury. We were founded 45 years ago by families living with brain injury, alongside researchers and clinicians like the amazing Dr. Dorothy Gromwell and Philip Wrightson. They came together with a shared belief that our people deserve better, really, around brain injury, better support, better information, and the reassurance that they didn't need to face this journey alone. So collaboration is woven into our whakapapa. It's been there from the beginning. It's how Headway began, and it continues to guide every part of the way we work today. So that's why it's so amazing to be able to be involved in these types of things, and we're really grateful. So today I'm just going to talk really briefly, like 4 minutes, hopefully not a lot more, and we can chat. Talk about and then hopefully collaborate on shaping support for brain health after sport. And I haven't done a PowerPoint. I just wanted to talk briefly about it and then look at ways people might like to get involved. So over the past couple of years, there's been a bit of a shift, or it seems to us a shift, in increasing awareness around long-term brain health after sport. And that's great, but there's also increasing anxiety that we're seeing. Media coverage has grown, and we know that it's not always accurate. At the same time, there's amazing research coming out. Recently there was New Zealand Rugby's research showing that players at provincial level or higher had a 61% increased risk of developing Alzheimer's. There's international research around football. So we're hearing more, but you can imagine that there's increased anxiety related to that in our communities. And for us at Headway, it's the stories that really bring urgency and personalise the data. We get calls from wives and adult children with concerns. My partner or my father has changed. His behaviour is frightening. Could this be CTE? We get questions, what is this? What should we do? Where should we go for help? Where can we get support? And these calls can be quite devastating, and they tend to have a shared theme of confusion, fear, and a real sense of a lack of clear information and support pathways for people worried about brain health after years of contact sport. So recently, earlier in the year, actually, quite a lot earlier in the year, Headway got to visit the Brain Bank, and we started talking with Helen Murray, and we saw that, or heard that she was also getting these similar calls. And as organisations, we really felt we had nothing to offer these families right now, and that's not good enough. So we realised that if we want to build a meaningful response, that we need to build a meaningful response. We want to give people an answer, a support pathway, an information pathway. But we realise this is going to take a collective and collaborative effort, as anything good requires. No one group can do this alone. So we're incredibly grateful that we've got together with Helen from Auckland Uni, of course, Alice, as always, helping to guide and inform, and also Marsha Marshall at Dementia Northern, because it is going to take, more than one group to be able to create the kind of response that we need. I've also reached out, to other organisations such as the Rugby Foundation and things like that. So then the next question for us was, yes, we want to respond, but now what? What should that response actually be? And obviously, we can't answer that on our own. We can't assume, we can't guess, we can't impose, what we think might be a solution on the people living with these worries every day. Best intentions aren't enough. So, I think it's probably a bit co-designed, but for us, it's just about being guided by the people who need the support, listening to them, partnering with them, and letting their experiences and their needs shape the type of support that we might develop. And so that's where this project, this, I suppose, research and survey came in, shaping support for brain health after sport. So it's a survey that we've done through Qualtrics with Alice's support, and we've put out there, we've got some good response. We want to hear directly from those concerned about long-term brain health after sport and from their whānau. We're asking, what are your concerns? What would support look like for you? And what are the barriers to getting support? And we haven't called it CTE or dementia. We've kept it as brain health after sport. We don't want to limit who can come forward. If someone is worried about their brain health after playing sport, whatever that looks like, then this is a space for them. And really, we hope that this format will reduce any stigma, will increase engagement, and ultimately help us to really hear from the people who need this support. Often those people who right now are saying they feel unseen and unheard. So today I just want to say we would love your support. We would love to gather more voices. So the survey is live now, and we would really love as many people as possible to share the survey widely, encourage participation from anyone who's concerned about their brain health after sport, because their voices will shape the response that's developed. And for anyone listening, if you're interested in supporting the co-design phase, the development phase, or the community response itself, we would love your support. Will only work if we can do it together. And again, all about collaboration. So thank you, and love to chat. Any questions?
Thanks so much, Stacey. Well, while people are thinking of if they've got questions, you can pop them in the chat or just come off mute and we will love to talk to you. But whilst people are thinking about what they might ask, I guess, is it possible to put the link in the chat?
Yeah, that's a
Oh,
great
yes,
idea.
it's on the
I've got
same
it
page.
open now.
Thank you very much. So then people can copy and share that. And I guess the other thing I might just add to that is just if people are worried about this being a research project and being shared, it's not necessarily a formal research study. It's more just us hearing what you need and what you would really like a support pathway to be. So please feel free to share. It won't go any further. We're not planning on distributing this in any way that will identify you. So I just wanted to, clarify that so people feel comfortable taking part. Thanks, Stacey. Are there any questions from anyone? Thanks for putting the link in the chat. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and as Alice said, it is all anonymous. There's a section at the end where people, if they do want to have more conversations and potentially be involved in, some roundtable conversations, they can give their contact details separately, and that's separated from the survey feedback. So all of that, the questions we're asking are anonymous. Is very important to say.
Can I just ask, do you want it just to be New Zealand responses, or is this open to international responses?
That's a great question, Patria. Maybe Alice answer, but in terms of understanding needs, it could be anywhere, but our response will very much be, I think, focused on what can we do practically in New Zealand. Is that whatever that might look like, the questions are very much around focused in providing support in New Zealand in a really practical way.
Thank you. And I see there's a question in the chat about how long the survey will be open. Good question.
That is a great question. We thought that we would close it. It actually doesn't say on there, but because of this happening now, we thought we would close it in the kind of mid-January. But I would take guidance from the researchers on that.
Yeah, that sounds fine. We've already had quite a few responses, which is wonderful to see. It's been some really good engagement. So we've already got quite a lot of ideas and suggestions to work through, which is fantastic. And yeah, we'd guess it's a busy time of year going up to Christmas, so it will be nice to have some time in the new year when people have had time to just reflect and think and perhaps take part when they've got a bit more time over the holidays. Any other thoughts or questions for Stacey? Is it sports specific or anyone with a head injury? Good question.
Shall I answer that? So really it's around, someone else asked that as well and talked about people who are getting a couple of concussions from cycling. And it is open to anyone, but this came about from those people who are not necessarily getting concussions, but are getting, multiple subconcussive knocks repeatedly over many years and are concerned about their brain health. But at the same time, anyone who's concerned, we're not going to eliminate them. I think it's really important. Anyone who is worried about their brain health can engage in it. The questions are specifically around sport, length of engagement in sport, and whether the support they would like, if there's value in actually making it sports focused so that sports people are connecting with each other. But anyone could answer those questions overall, because if that's not important to them, we could hear that.
Fantastic. Thanks, Stacey. And I guess just to add that we did a study recently with the Dunedin study team who have been looking at people over their lifetime, and we actually looked at people's concussion histories. And in the general population, we didn't see any evidence of any long-term impacts on brain health, particularly in the areas of cognitive functioning. So just to reassure anyone out there that what we're talking about here is, as Stacey mentioned, those people who've been exposed to repetitive injuries over a short period of time, where the evidence does seem to indicate a link to longer-term brain health and things like dementia, CTE, and issues with cognitive functioning. So that's the group this is particularly aimed at. But just to reassure those of you who have had one or two injuries like myself, we actually didn't see anything concerning from that study, which is really reassuring, I think, for all of us to hear when we hear so much about CTE in the media. And we've got one last question from Sam. Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, so Sam asked around the sporting background. So we have, obviously we're trying not to anticipate and wait for all of the results to come through, but we do have a good number, as Alice said, and what we're getting at the moment is around 30% of rugby. The rest are mixed over rugby league, but also, a range of sports. We haven't had any motorsport yet actually come through. So, but at least 30% were rugby, if not slightly more from memory. And I think that's partly the channels that it's gone out through as well. But it'll be interesting to see if we can spread it wider, what we get.
Okay, well, that's a challenge to us all, I think. So share away, please, everyone. It would be great to really get as many ideas as we can for this to really inform how we take it forward. So thanks so much for that, Stacey. I think we're going to have to move on to our next speaker now, but really appreciate you talking that through with everyone. So next up, we've got Christy.
Kia ora, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen. I do have a wee presentation to share.
Fantastic, thank you. And did you just want to briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, I will. So my name's Christy Essex. I'm the postdoctoral fellow with the Women's Health and Neuroscience research program, and really honoured to be here, presenting this research on behalf of the wider team. So our mission with the Women's Health and Neuroscience research program is pretty simple. What we want to do is improve concussion care, particularly for women and minorities who are often overlooked in scientific research. And we want to do this by identifying blood-based biomarkers of brain injury and recovery. We're also really committed to reducing barriers to brain healthcare access here in Aotearoa, and making sure that we do really good science that leads to better outcomes for everybody who experiences a concussion. So concussion or mild traumatic brain injury is far more common than I think a lot of people realise. Around half of all people will experience a traumatic brain injury at least once in their lifetime. And because 90% of these injuries are classified as mild, you can imagine what the prevalence is of concussion and mild traumatic brain injury. So I think it's really important to highlight that this is not a niche issue. It touches families, it touches communities, workplaces, and sports across the country. And although this injury is called mild, the effects can be anything but. So many people experience really debilitating symptoms that can last days, months, or in some cases, they can last for years. And this can cause people to struggle to return to work or sport, need to step away for long periods, or in some cases, they can't return at all. And for a subset of people, concussion, particularly as Alice mentioned, repeated exposure to head injury can increase the risk of later neurological problems. So we really need good ways of understanding what's going on. One of the biggest gaps in this field is that women tend to have worse symptoms and longer recovery times relative to men, yet most concussion research hasn't focused on women. Hormones appear to play a role, but we don't fully understand how or why at this stage. And because women and girls are so underrepresented in concussion studies and in the scientific literature more broadly, the care they can receive might not be tailored to their specific biology or needs. And so that issue is a major driver of this research project. So right now, concussion diagnosis relies mostly on symptoms. So somebody talking about how they feel and a basic neurological check. Expensive CT scans can be used, but they're primarily used to rule out dangerous bleeding. And in concussion, they're usually normal. And that symptom reporting can provide really valuable information about a patient's subjective experience, but they can also be influenced by a number of different things like pain, sleep, stress, mood, and even whether somebody feels comfortable speaking up about what they're experiencing. And they don't really tell us what's happening to the tissues inside the brain. So we need objective, inexpensive tools that give us clear information to complement these self-reported symptoms. Something like a blood test that can tell us this brain tissue has been injured. And that's where this research comes in. So when the brain is injured, it releases specific proteins into the blood, which we can actually measure. So two of the most promising are GFAP, which comes from the support cells in the brain, and UCHL1, which comes from the nerve cells. And don't worry, you're not expected to remember those acronyms. High levels of these proteins have been linked to more severe injury and worse outcomes following a concussion. So an easy way to conceptualize this is to think of the brain as a piñata. When it's intact, everything stays inside, but after a concussion, it's like giving the piñata a hit, and the structures get damaged with those contents starting to leak out. In this case, the lollies in the piñata are proteins like GFAP and UCHL1 that appear in the blood after injury. And by measuring them, we can tell that the brain has been hurt, but we need a lot more research in this space. So to move this forward, the Women's Health and Neuroscience Research Program has partnered with Abbott in the United States, who've developed the technology to measure these markers rapidly and accurately. And together we're validating these blood tests in New Zealand across different groups, ages, and settings so that we can understand how they behave here in our unique context. And our long-term goal is to integrate these tools into the New Zealand healthcare system and to enable individualized care for everyone who experiences a concussion. So the study has 4 key objectives. The first is to see whether these blood markers can identify a concussion and help us monitor recovery. The second is to examine how well they work, specifically for females or Māori and Pacific people. So these are groups that have been underrepresented in past studies. And third is to test how easy it is to collect and process these samples in the New Zealand community. And finally, to understand how other factors like age or health history might affect the quality of the samples that we're getting. So can we rely on those samples that we're getting? So to answer these questions properly, we've been testing hundreds of New Zealanders. So these are people with and without a recent concussion. They're people that are age 16 and over, of any gender and all ethnicities. So a very broad inclusion criteria. But to interpret a blood test, we need to know first what's normal. So normal could differ by sex, it could differ by ethnicity or by hormone levels. And we have no New Zealand specific ranges for some of these markers like GFAP and UCHL1. But if we test hundreds of healthy New Zealanders, we can build our own normal range. Then when somebody has a concussion, we can see where they sit compared to healthy people of their age and sex and demographic. So that's step 1 of this research. Step 2 is to test people with concussion. So research suggests these tests are sensitive up to 72 hours after injury. But we're using this large-scale study to understand how sensitive these biomarkers are to concussion, yes, but also how long they stay elevated and how these levels evolve and change over time as the concussion evolves. So this is why we're following people up to 7 months after their concussion. And we also use other tests, additional measures like hormone levels, to determine whether they can help us understand who recovers quickly and why, and who might need more support. So since we started in mid-May of this year, we have had 266 healthy people and 91 people with concussion participate in the study. And they're coming to us via hospital, via the ED setting, and from community settings as well. And the level of engagement has been really incredible. I think it shows that people really want better answers and better care, whether they're providing it or receiving it. So we've had a lot of support from doctors, ED nurses, etc., to undertake this research. So our study is really leading the world for several reasons. Firstly, we are building the first New Zealand data set to establish what normal biomarkers look like. We're one of the few studies internationally that focuses on women, and our findings reflect real-world concussion, not only the cases that end up in the emergency department. And so this work really matters for the future and lays the foundation for simple, accessible blood tests for concussion. It could help clinicians make faster, more accurate decisions. It could help guide return to play decisions for athletes. It helps us understand why different groups experience concussion differently. And ultimately, it brings us closer to equitable, personalized care for everyone. So technical details aside, one of the biggest reminders of why we do this work comes from the personal stories we encounter with our participants, especially those living with concussion. So these are real words from someone experiencing a concussion that came through the study. And I think they highlight just how disruptive this injury can be, emotionally, cognitively, physically, and socially. And our work is about making sure these experiences are understood, taken seriously, and supported with a range of tools. So to wrap up, if you think what we're doing is a step in the right direction, you can also help support us. If you know someone with a concussion from within the last 7 months, please do encourage them to contact us. Or if you or anyone you know would like to participate as part of that healthy control group and help us build those normal ranges, we would also really love to hear from you. And we would love your help with increasing visibility by sharing this research with your network. And that involvement could really help us shape the future of concussion care in New Zealand. Thank you all so much for your time. And I really hope you're as excited about the research that we're doing as I am. Any questions?
Thanks so much, Christy. How cool. Lots of hand clapping going on, I see. The emojis.
Thank you, everyone.
Are there any comments or questions for Christy?
Yeah, I'll pop in. Thanks for presenting, Christy. That was awesome. Do you mind just sort of talking through how your recruitment process is going, how you're trying to access some of the less likely populations to put their hands up here, how you get the folks with experience like the domestic violence backgrounds or anything like that, and that might be a little less accessible?
Yeah, absolutely. So that is kind of the domain that I'm in charge of, is that outreach and recruitment. Firstly, we've been leveraging people that have established connections, for example, with concussion care clinics or with the ED. We can't kind of go and directly target, for example, sensitive issues like domestic violence, but we are really leveraging those warm introductions to get us situated in the EDs. We've just gotten into Waitemata, so that's North Shore and Waitakere. We're looking at ADHB. We're down in the emergency department at Hart Valley, and we're in almost all concussion care clinics in Auckland as well. But aside from that, so this is really community-based, and so I do a lot of outreach, primarily via email until I can kind of get a warm introduction and then go and meet with people in person. But just making a good database of people in those different demographics. So for example, seniors, reaching out to senior groups, coffee groups, things like that, sports teams to get those sports concussions. So just really strategizing and thinking and then leveraging, and any interest that we get, following that up with kind of really personalized meetings and coffees and things like that.
Thanks, Christy. And I see someone's asked if you can put the link from your last slide in the chat so that they can share it with their team.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Linda. That's great. Mel.
Are you in Dunedin yet?
We are not in Dunedin yet.
Can we think about coming to Dunedin?
Absolutely. I'm sure that's a discussion that Alice and Petria would love to have with you.
Yeah, I think it'd be
Definitely,
great.
Mel.
We have such a beautiful like rugby community here, but also because we're working a lot with our high schools, we have parents who come. We do regular like catch ups with our families, and they're such a wonderful group, and they have lots of questions, and I just think it's such a great project, and it'd be good to link with them. And also because we're doing some work with Matai already, we're doing the MRI stuff. I feel like it's a really good like thing that we could hopefully meld in. Be cool.
That would be wonderful.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mel. We'll follow up with you. Great. Okay. So Mel, given you're just on, do you want to go next? Thanks, Christy.
Thank you.
Sure. Let me see if I can share this slide. Can we see that?
Yes, we can. Wonderful. Thank you.
And we can hear me. Good. So thanks again for inviting me. I really want to also thank Patria and Alice for inviting me into their little family with the BHRI group. It's been really lovely connecting with everyone and being part of this really amazing organization. So today I've just put together a little compilation of things to show this type of work that we've been doing in the community to look at collision sport, particularly rugby, and how we try to combine our science, sensors, and to make more resilient players, hopefully. So our motto here is protecting players, preserving the game. Sorry, see if I can find it. There we go. So basically, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing in the community to try to make players safer, a little bit about head impact monitoring, how that works, how we build more relevant injury models, again, focusing on females and youth athletes because they are very much underrepresented in the research. I was just thinking, actually, when the last two talks, I've been recently involved in the FAIR consensus group, and I think that's another conversation we should have in this forum about the female, women, and girl athletes and injury prevention consensus, because I think there's a lot of crossover here. So building those models, providing evidence-informed guidance to sport organizations about how we can modify the game. I'll talk about a few things that we've already recommended to World Rugby, and how we use evidence-informed interventions to help improve that contact load or head acceleration load in players. So why rugby and why we study rugby obviously here is because it is our national sport. It is a really popular sport. We have 150,000 registered rugby players in New Zealand. And I feel like rugby is such a deep part of the New Zealand culture and identity. It is such an important cornerstone, I think, to how New Zealanders see themselves. It's part of it really is part of the New Zealand identity. So I think it's a very important sport to us, and for many reasons other than just it's a sport. So I think it's important. And the other thing is that we see a lot of information about professional players, and we know that professional players have the highest individual risk for concussion. And depending on what article you read and what country you're in, it's anywhere from 0.004 to 0.018 concussions per playing hour. But when you look at our community and just how many people we have played rugby in the community, it's a very much lower concussion rate, which is good. But when we look at the burden of how many people we have playing, we actually are looking at, for every one professional concussion, we have 53 community concussions. So as a population burden, we actually have a much greater burden for concussion in our community, even though individually we might not have individual players who receive more more concussion load, we definitely have a higher burden of concussion in the community. And the other way to look at it is that the community players are the professionals of the future. And the thing that we're really missing in our research is how do we go from youth sport, which is really healthy and good for us, to professional sport, and somewhere along the way, it's becoming unhealthy for us. So where is that trigger point? So we really need to understand more about the load at that community level to understand that. So this is where instrumented mouthguards have come in, into the professional field, but also down in the community level. And they are an absolute game changer in terms of us understanding the relationship between the contact loads that happen on the field and the brain response. They really are the new frontier in how we're going to better understand that mechanical load translated to the brain from sport. So these, if you're not familiar with these, if you've not seen these on the professional field or at the World Cup recently with the lights and things, they're instrumented mouthguards. They have sensors inside them that actually measure with really great precision the movement of the head when you experience a contact event. They only record during a contact event, so you don't get a lot of nonsense data. So we have really good understanding of what happened at that moment. We couple it with video, so we often go back to the video, and there are a lot of people trying to go away from video, but I still think we really need the video to get context for what's going on in order to make those informed decisions around the gameplay. So the player on the field, in this case, we have a player here who's going to experience a contact event. Right. So what happens? That happens. The mouthguard is triggered. It sends information to a tablet on the sideline, or sometimes, if we can, we get the referee wearing a watch. That will trigger an alert. That data gets recorded, and what we see is this peak event. And that peak event at the moment is also being used on the sidelines in the professional game to trigger a head injury assessment if that event is large enough. So this gives us really good information about the magnitude of events, but also the frequency of events, which is really important to us. So when we're looking at monitoring, what we're really interested in is understanding that everything that will trigger the head to accelerate, because we want to know not just the things that are going to cause acute injury, but more about what kinds of cumulative exposure there is, and at what point does that cumulative exposure potentially increase risk, like by making us more vulnerable to a lower threshold of loading, or to concussion, that insidious concussion, the kind that doesn't show up on the day, but people present with symptoms maybe the next day. And we see that a lot in the community, particularly with youth. So the thing we all understand probably really innately is the direct contact. And that's when you have like a direct blow to the head, and it causes the head to accelerate quite violently. But that's, the one we all see. It's easy to see. We probably don't really need measurements as much for that one. We also have ones where you get a heavy contact to the body, or even landing on the ground hard. Like even when players score a try, you'd be amazed at the size of those loads. We call those indirect loads that cause like a whiplash event to the head. And those can actually be quite large. And the other thing a lot of people are surprised at is that we get a lot of triggers in the mouthguard from events where the athlete's actually generating that acceleration under their own momentum. So when they're landing, cutting, doing really like quick changes of motion, they will trigger events that will actually cause head acceleration. We don't typically see these as dangerous, but we just want to know how much of them there actually are in the game. So something I did for World Rugby when we first started working with World Rugby was to try to develop some work to explain to the public what it means, like what exactly is a G, and at what point should we be concerned about Gs, right? So 1G is essentially like, it's Newton's law, it's like acceleration due to gravity. So it's equal to 9.81 meters per second squared. So if you think of standing still right now, not moving at all, you have this amount of load on your body. So that's just natural gravity. So would be equal to 9.81 meters per second squared. So in the average rugby game, 60 to 70% of all the events we record will be in the 6 to 10 G range. And if you think about what that might feel like, 6 to 10 Gs, it's like riding a roller coaster. Particularly a really good roller coaster, like one of those really good ones that you go on at Six Flags, that really like takes off and whips you back. That's what it's like, 6 to 10 Gs. When you're getting to the 10 to 12 G kind of range, that's a trampoline. Particularly like a gymnastics trampoline. We used to work with freestyle skiers, and they would trigger this regularly on a trampoline when they're doing practicing for new tricks, and even up to 20 Gs at times, depending on the type of trick that they were practicing. So again, not necessarily a violent thing, but something that will trigger a high head acceleration load. Then we get to the 10 to 19 G range. We get about 20 to 30% of events in this range. And you're thinking actually of a gymnastics vault. So I work with some people at Wake Forest University. They do a lot of gymnastics research on head acceleration events. They wear mouth guards, and they regularly record this threshold on a vault. So if you ever watch gymnastics, if you see those amazing gymnasts do vault, that's what they're experiencing on their heads. So then we get to 20 to 30 G. This is getting to a higher magnitude of load. We see fewer of these, 6 to 10% possibly. And this is like a really sharp braking maneuver. So if you've ever been like nearly rear-ending somebody, like you've really had to, somebody stop short in front of you, you had to slam on the brakes, and you've got a change in acceleration, like about 15 kilometers per hour, that you feel like that kind of violent head shake, that is around 30 G. So the crash test research that's been done has found that those events can be up to 30 G, and they don't typically result in concussion injury in and of themselves. But this is a really important turning point for us, because this is the point where we think cumulative load may lower the threshold within this range. So that's the range we're actually really interested in understanding more. Now, when we get over 30 G, we're looking at much fewer events, like 2 to 3% over 30 G, less than that, 1% over 50 G. And now we're talking about direct contact mechanisms, almost wholly direct contact mechanisms in this range. So head-to-head contacts, elbow-to-head contacts, shoulder-to-head contacts, that's where we're seeing those direct contact events happening. And this is where we're trying to work out important trigger thresholds of the mouth guard that can lead directly to a player's assessment on the sidelines, and where we're trying to understand more about how we might be able to use that. But more about that in a moment. So that's, I guess, in terms of if you're trying to understand what it would feel like to experience something at that magnitude, that's what it should or would feel like. The question I often get asked is there an actual threshold for concussion? Parents ask me this all the time, and I always feel terrible telling them that there just isn't. The mechanism for concussion is so complex. It is so complex, and the way you experience an impact event on the field can be any part of the head, and every part of the head is mechanically different. We have different vulnerabilities at different parts. So depending on where the contact comes from, the position of the player, there's so many factors that can come into it to make some events, like we've seen players walk away from 80 G events, and we've seen players get concussed at a 25 G event. Like, it's very difficult to say there's one magic number, but we hope that obviously the more monitoring to do, the more data we collect, we will get closer and closer to understanding, here's a number for this type of impact, here's a number for this type of impact. And that's really where we're going to end up. It's not going to be one number, it's going to be many numbers, I think. But we need a lot more data to really understand the nuances between those. So I just want to give you a little bit of overview of what we learned from the largest scale community study that we did. It was the first large scale community study done back in 2021 in conjunction with World Rugby. And I commend them for commissioning this work. And we learned a lot from it. So we targeted 700 community athletes from grades from under 13 up to FPC. That's never been done before, and it was amazing. We loved doing this work. We captured, I think, actually more than 147 games. It was probably closer to 160 or 170 games and nearly 200 training sessions for these athletes. We recorded more than 600 hours of video. We had 3 video cameras on the field at all times, and we had the referees wearing a head cam during the games. And we captured over that 2-year period that we were studying these athletes more than 38,000 head impact events with the mouth guards. I have 6 terabytes of data that we will be mining for a long time, I think. So I want to give you a little bit about what we learned from this, because I think this is what's more interesting. One, we learned just where those trigger thresholds were, you know, what I just showed you, like where the data sits, how many of those events we record, what relatively safe things look like, what relatively dangerous things look like. This is where World Rugby decided on their trigger thresholds based off the data that we recorded in this. So we published so many of these types of curves just showing how many events, how many minutes per event is you see. So we see, you know, 1 over 10G event every 7 to 10 minutes, and 1 over 60G event every 2 to 3 games in the community. So they're not super frequent, but they definitely happen. We looked at the effects of training, because one of the questions we had was, are contact training safe? And how much contact training should athletes be doing? And what we found was that what you would probably expect, that the younger people experience a higher burden of head impact events or head acceleration events during training than adults do. So the community adults actually have very low burden of head acceleration events during training. And that's because they spend more time on tactical work during training, whereas the kids actually spend more time learning to do contact. So it makes sense. But in reverse, the kids actually have less exposure during games because they have lower playing time. So we definitely they get most of the load definitely during trainings, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's dangerous load. It's just where the load is coming from. And what we're doing now is we're really digging into that training data to understand which training events are dangerous, and I'll talk about that too in a moment. Not surprising to anybody, tackles and rucks are where most of the dangerous events happen, where most of the large magnitude events happen, regardless of playing grade, regardless of age, regardless of sex. These are the 2 things that happen in rugby that cause the greatest head accelerations. And again, confirming some things we already thought was happening, higher tackles cause higher head acceleration events. And this helped inform World Rugby's tackle height mandate. The other thing we really were interested in looking at was, what are the mechanisms, those shoulder to head, head to head, that type of thing. And one of the things we found here was that the head-to-head contacts, or the primary, where you have that primary impact, is where we get the big events happening in adults. But in young people, it's more likely to be secondary. So after that initial contact, it's as they're coming to ground, they're catching a stray knee or a stray foot or something else, which is leading to problems for them. And so with the contact training, as there's some caution, we want to really particularly look at tackle shields and things like that are being used to reduce the contact load, because those may actually lead to higher head acceleration loads. So that's something we're digging into. We've provided some feedback to World Rugby around tackle height, and that is being implemented and being further studied, because obviously we know it's better to lower height for the ball carrier, but for the tackler, we're still not sure. And then the other one that we're recommending at the moment is to reduce the number of players in rucks for community and youth. And if we can reduce the number of players that are allowed to enter a ruck or enter a tackle, that would reduce that number of stray impact events that happen to those youth players as they're coming to ground. So they're not going to catch the extra 3rd or 4th person's knee or foot as they go down. So that's, I don't know if they'll take it up, but that's the recommendation we're making. So the other thing that we found was that experience is really important when it comes to head control, that our less experienced players have higher rotational acceleration than our more experienced players. And that really gives us a lot of insight into what we can do to help improve the resilience of players. Because obviously you can't give them more years of play, but you can train them to expect contact loads and train the muscles to respond in a more timely fashion for a contact load. So these are, common sort of neuromuscular functions that you just learn over a period of time experiencing them. So you have to experience this event in order for your brain to develop a pattern of protection. So it really is something that we can actually train and improve in our younger athletes and our female athletes in particular. How am I doing on time, Alice?
Yeah, sorry, we probably need to wrap up, Mel.
Yeah. So one of the things we do in our lab is we look at the head control mechanics, and we study this in various contexts that relate to rugby. So a lot of like slow-mo videos here. I won't show all of them, but so we look at sorry, I don't know what I was on. So we look at that slow-mo kind of thing. We want to see what's happening with the head during tackle events, carry events, and backwards falls, to understand how we respond. We know strength is not the answer, like just being really strong isn't necessarily the answer because it takes us too much time to get to that maximal strength. What we really want to look at is those short period of window, because that 50 millisecond window is really where the head impact happens. Like the mouth guard records for 50 milliseconds, and that's where we see peak head acceleration. So that's what we're targeting with our training strategies. And what we found is that, I'll skip this for you. What we found is that in our rugby players, the people that have the fastest 50 millisecond muscle activation have the lowest head acceleration, both on field and in our laboratory. So that's telling us that's a really important time point, and we know why in terms of the way the brain functions. But we also find that we can develop certain interventions that will target that 50 milliseconds. So we've done some interventions in our clinic where we've done some training with athletes to mimic these types of activities that they'll see on the field. And when we've done that, we have actually seen lower head acceleration, increased time to that peak acceleration force, and a reduced head displacement. So over time, this will reduce the absolute load on these athletes and make them safer in the field, we believe. So that's me for now. So our focus in our lab is getting better data, building better models, and making safer players.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Mel. Unfortunately, we're not going to have time for questions. We've only got a few minutes left, but thank you so much for that. And if anyone wants to get in touch, hopefully that's okay. They can get in contact with you directly.
Yep.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So just before we finish up, I just wanted to share another really exciting initiative that's going to be starting in the new year. And this is particularly involving women who have been exposed to domestic violence, so intimate partner violence, but also violence that they've experienced over the course of their lifetime through family as well. And what we've realised, we've got some papers coming out very soon. Many of you will remember if you came to the Community Connections event that Eva Lera talked a lot about how there's so many injuries that occur during domestic violence. And again, it's in that kind of repeated head impacts within quick succession over many years for many people. And most of those injuries are sustained to the head or to the neck. So this is a particularly at-risk group that's been very much neglected in both the research, but also in terms of clinical practice. So we've been interviewing these women over the last few years, and what we hear very strongly is they don't know to think about concussion when these events are happening. Obviously, they're much more concerned for their own and often their children's safety. But and even if they do go to the emergency department, it's something that healthcare professionals don't always feel able to ask or know what to do afterwards. We've got a quote that someone said, I just don't think it's on anyone's radar. And it's not just healthcare professionals, but it's also police, ambulance workers, other people who are involved at that first point to potentially raise it because women are not necessarily able to think about concussion at that time. But something that we've learned is that it's something that people wish they'd known about. But the trouble is, it's not. It's a more complex situation than it is for people who have a concussion in the general population, and so we're aware that we can't just go in and give people an information leaflet at the time. It just doesn't feel appropriate. But so we want to co-create resources for women in these situations. We don't know what the resources are going to be. We want to hear from people in terms of what they might look like, how they might access them, how we disseminate it in a way that they feel able to engage with the material. We also want to develop some training resources for healthcare professionals so they do feel more able to ask about domestic violence and respond to potential concussion if someone does present to the ED. So we're going to be holding a series of workshops next year. And we're really keen to hear the perspectives of healthcare professionals, concussion providers, people with personal experience, people who know of someone who has been through this and would like to know what they can do to help and share their perspectives. And we're going to work with a design team on putting some resources together, as I said, to both improve training, but also for women so that they can reach out and get information when they feel ready. So if anyone is keen to get involved, please contact me. We'll be holding these workshops throughout New Zealand next year. We are able to do some Zoom interviews with you if you're not able to get to one of our hui, but we would love to hear a complete range of perspectives because we know that this isn't going to be simple, but we know we need to do something. So we would really value people putting their hand up and getting involved. So I apologise, I didn't introduce myself at the beginning of today, but I'm Alice Thedham. I'm one of the co-directors of BHRI, the Brain Health Research Institute, and I'd love to hear from you. I'll put my email in the chat so that you can contact directly if you're interested. So as you can see from the 4 speakers today, there's some really exciting stuff going on in the Institute. And this is just some of the work that's going on. There's a lot of other things happening. So it's great that you've reached out to engage with us and hear what we're up to and to stay involved. And we'd love for you to get involved in any of these activities if you're interested. And thank you again for joining us for this forum. We will be holding them again in the new year, so please keep in touch with our newsletters to find out when the next one will be. And if you've got any ideas or suggestions for things that you'd like to hear more about, please let us know because we're very happy to reach out. As you can see, we've got teams working in all sorts of areas in the field of brain health and concussion. So do let us know if there's something you're really keen to hear about. But thanks so much for your time. Well, I'll wrap us up for today. But really appreciate you coming along this morning. Kia ora, ngā mihi. Thank you.